On the news tonight, Northern Christian elders accuse the All Progressives Congress of using money to divide Christians. Senate debates bill on rotation of power between the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. And the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, raises interest rate to 15.5% to tame rising inflation. Well, many thanks for joining us on News Now. I am Folashade Ogurinde. The Northern State Christian Elders Forum has accused the All Progressives Congress of using monetary incentives to cause division among Christians in the North. In a statement issued on Tuesday, Ejoga Inulegwo, chairman of the forum, called on Christians to be wary of the antics of politicians ahead of the 2023 elections. The forum alleged that the APC is making such moves in an attempt to counter the stand of the Christian Association of Nigeria on the Muslim ticket of the ruling party. The Christian body also called on Nigerians to reject divisive and self-seeking politicians. A bill to whittle down powers possessed by the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, which was sponsored by Senator Sadiq Suleiman Umar, representing Kwara North Senatorial District, scaled second reading in the Senate on Tuesday. The lawmakers sought an amendment of the CBN Act No. 7 for the power of the governor to be divested at the appointment of anyone into services of the Apex Bank. In the lead debate, the lawmaker proposed that the new chairman of the board of the Central Bank will have powers to determine the salaries and allowances of members, as the governor focuses strictly on administrative duties in the running of the Apex Bank. Senator Suleiman further argued that the board would be responsible for the annual budget of the Bankers Bank, which he said is the global standard.
The objective of this bill includes, 1, to enable the appointment of a person other than the governor as the chairman of the board of the CBN. 2, to divest the board of the powers of determining and fixing the salaries and allowances of its members. And 3, to consider and approve the annual budget of the bank, which lies solely with the National Assembly. In this regard, there arose the need for an enduring legal framework that will reposition CBN to be at par with other Apex banks around the world.
I would recommend that this thing be stepped down, so that we'll be given a step down so we can have more materials.
This is not just a corporate organization. This is the Central Bank of Nigeria. Now, that is in charge of the reserve and in charge of everything. Now, on the matter of determining salaries and all that, that is not the key issue. The key issue is the management of myself and yourself and all of us, our incomes, expenditures, value of our currency. So, we just don't rush into, okay, let's just go ahead and do public hearing. No, sir. Before we agree on this, I need to know why you insist that the chairman can no longer be the chief executive. There must be stated reasons, because that will impact on our decision.
When I said I was running for the presidency, I was there. I went all over the place, even though some of our aspirants didn't go out to campaign, but they admitted they were running. I think we should not link this bill with that incident. We should be looking at the merit of the bill.
The Chief of Defense Staff, General Loki Irabo, has appealed to military veterans under the aegis of the retired members of Nigerian Armed Forces and the Coalition of Concerned Military Veterans to call off their protest. The protesters had pitched a tent and blocked access to the Ministry of Defense located in the country's capital city over the non-payment of their security debarment allowance, among others. The retired militarymen had in January this year picketed the Ministries of Finance, Defense and the National Assembly earlier in the year in pursuit of the same demand.
Yes, approval has been given for your security department allowance to be paid, but the funds have not yet been released. It's not anywhere, either here in the ministry or in the defense headquarters or anywhere. That is what the Minister of Defense is working hard to secure the release. In addition to the request for the reduction of the period that will be paid. So all we can at this stage appeal to you, not only do you go home quietly and peacefully, but for you to continue to support the efforts of the federal government and indeed the armed forces, as you have always done, in bringing peace to the various parts of our country. Be rest assured that all the little problems that exist within the Veterans Association, that equally will be resolved, so that at the end of the day we have a common front, a body that indeed administers that seeks the interests of all the veterans in the country.
We are the ones leading the ministry now, and we have vowed to do our utmost best to give what is best for the people of Nigeria, and particularly to the armed forces and the veterans, to the best of our ability. That is what we have accepted to do, and we are proud to continue to do that.
As part of the ongoing reform efforts to deepen staff skills and competencies as well as improve on career prospects, the Nigeria Immigration Service has kick-started a 4-day technical working committee meeting in Lagos in partnership with the International Center for Migration Policy and Development. The multi-stakeholders technical working committee has participants from both the private and government institutions, including developmental partners. Deputy Comptroller General of Immigration and Chairman of the committee, Mohammed Aminu Mohammed, said the essence of the meeting is to deepen conversations on the efforts by the service to modernize its capacity building and career development activities with a view to making career development not only demand-driven.
Upscaling the capacity of immigration service. You all agree with me that immigration management is a phenomenon that is evolving. So Nigeria cannot be static. We have to upscale our staff in terms of training so that they can cope with the modern immigration management, so that we can sync with the global practice. If you want to have it well, you have to update yourself in terms of skills and knowledge. So what we are trying to do now is we are taking stock of what we have on ground and see where we are lacking or what we think will bring on board.
The collaboration between ICMPD and NIS, Nigeria Immigration Service, dates back to many years before now. We have been supporting the Nigeria Immigration Service on blue borders. We have been supporting in capacity building, border management, under the support to free movement of persons and migration funded by the EU. We are also discussing with the NIS on many other fronts, and this one is just one of them.
The CCR Foundation, a non-governmental organization, has trained 100 patent and preparatory medicine vendors and pharmacists on appropriate response and care to child survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. The maiden capacity building workshop tagged First Medical Responders Training was in commemoration of the World Contraception Day. Speaking to newsmen during the training, the Chief Executive Officer of the foundation, Ditutu Ajibodu, said the training would empower them with knowledge on how to identify signs of SGBV in children to enable them give appropriate care, referral and response to the children.
We've realized that these people are first responders to health cases when it comes to SGBV, and we've taken it upon ourselves to see that they are trained appropriately in knowing how to respond to sexual and gender-based violence. At the end of the training, what we expect is that they have capacity to understand how to refer cases of sexual and gender-based violence to the appropriate organizations. For example, the Chechera Foundation. It's not only for them to get the medical attention that they require, but also to get access to other services that we have, that we provide, such as legal aid, such as psychosocial support, such as shelter. So what we've done today is to empower them. We've given them the knowledge to know how to refer cases of sexual and gender-based violence to the appropriate agents. We want them to know how to identify the signs of sexual and gender-based violence. There's so many people that are being abused constantly, especially children. Nobody's going to speak up and say, I've just been abused, because of the shame, because of the stigma. Now, if a particular child has been going to a particular pharmacy for such a long time, going back, getting emergency contraceptives, obviously that's a sign. There's a problem somewhere. So we're asking that they understand, we're teaching them to understand those signs, and with those signs, you can trace those children to their homes to understand if they're being abused or not.
One of the first things that needs to happen is you need to first prevent the abuse from reoccurring, right? If you nip it in the bud, the earlier you nip it in the bud, the better chances you have of getting a better outcome. So, which is why we're actually here, because the PPMVs are the people in the communities. They are the ones who know those people. They are the ones who interact with these people on a daily basis. So it is important, that they are in the fight. How can we prevent them? I think early recognition, early treatment will also help.
The Senate has commenced debate on a bill for an act to provide for the rotation of power between the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. The bill, which passed the first reading earlier this year, is sponsored by Senator Abba Moro from Benue South. The bill is generating controversy as some senators argue that it will bring about unity and a sense of belonging for all, especially ethnic minorities, while others say it will go against the Constitution of Nigeria. However, the Senate President, Hamad Lawan, advised the sponsor of the bill to stand the bill down and rework it for representation with specific prayer.
Because power rotation can be a veritable tool for our national integration, unity, inclusion, peace, and political stability. May I mention that for democracy to thrive anywhere, it must be adapted to suit the political reality of its environment. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, for the progress of our democracy, equity and equality should define its process. Mr. President, my highly respected colleagues, time has come for us to reach certain peculiar compromises in respect to our political reality for the sake of our cohesion as a people. And one way to achieve this is through power rotation amongst all the geopolitical zones. Governorship among the senatorial districts and federal constituencies of our country. Rotation of power is the strongest antidote against secessionist threats in this country.
As a multi-ethnic, a multi-religious nation, managing and harnessing our diversity, to me, can be an asset rather than allowing it to be a liability. And of course, the effective management of our diversity is what this bill seeks to address in such a way that feelings and perceptions of marginalization at all levels, at state and federal levels, and even within constituencies, can be addressed by the passage of this bill.
When our colleagues will say this will run contrary to the provision of the Constitution, they mean he is not asking for any constitutional amendment. Therefore, this bill or the law he's seeking will run into serious and massive collision with provisions of the Constitution. And that's the issue our colleagues are raising.
Well, to speak more on the development, Evan Tufeli, legal expert and social commentator, joins me now. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, what do you make of the proposed bill on rotation of power among 6 geopolitical zones of the country? Will this improve Nigeria's political climate?
Well, democracy is a social experiment. It is a process of governance or government. And that requires a lot of adaptation, okay? The democratic disposition and the way democracy is practiced from ancient Greece, where it was propounded, is not how it is practiced today, because there have been a lot of modifications ranging from different environments. People will only pick and apply that which is compatible with the society where they live in. Generally speaking, democracy has been defined as government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It's about the people, but in as much as it's about the people, it requires, a lot of adaptations. It requires a lot of adjustment depending on the environment where the democracy is practiced. In our own location, okay, the parliament is talking about power rotation, to have a legislation that will determine power rotation. Why is that? It is because the respective political parties who already have zoning in their constitution only this year jettison those provisions that they have in their party constitution. The PDP jettisoned zoning, and some other political parties along the line. So it is now a necessity that Parliament should think, as part of its function to oversight the process of governance, oversight institutions, and make laws with respect to Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution, which empower it to make laws for the good governance of the country. Now, it's going to be a good experiment, because if we now have a unifying law that now determines which zone, whether it is the south-south, southeast, northwest, or northeast, or whichever region that is going, the president is going to be zoned to, or the president is going to be zoned to, will not be determined by a working legislation, which will be a subsidiary law, or is going to be in the constitution. Whichever way, if you're going to have a separate law to that effect, is going to ensure that there is inclusiveness. Because if you look at the constitution in section 1413, Section 14, subsection 13, it talks about the provisions of federal character, that appointment must be inclusive in all areas of the country, that people should be extracted from all areas of the country. Now, taking it to the presidency or the president, if you now have a provision of law that totally determines that power should rotate according to that provision, then if any region tries to bring up a candidate against that law, then there will be a violation to that law, and that will now give us the desired expectation or aspiration that we want to see, that there's common inclusiveness in all areas of the country, that if the president comes from the south this time, the next time it should come from the north, and the next time it should come from the east, and the next time it should come from the west. And that will determine also where the vice president will come from, and where, because we are a multilingual nation, and with a lot of tribes, totaling up to 371. So there is a need to have that in our laws. There are people who argue that no, competency should override that, but you can see, every area of this country we have competent people. So if that is true, that means the law is a veritable, it's going to be a veritable source of conflict resolution as regards where the president should come from.
Well, indeed, Evan Tufeli, legal expert, thank you very much for your time and your contribution. Well, we'll take a break here, but still to come, Mikel Obi announces retirement from football. Details of the story and more right after this break. Welcome back. Now here is a recap of some of our top stories tonight. The Northern State Christian Elders Forum has accused the All Progressives Congress of using monetary incentives to cause division among Christians in the North. The forum alleged that the APC is making such moves in an attempt to counter the stand of a Christian Association of Nigeria on the Muslim ticket of the ruling party. I will also told you that the Senate has commenced debate on a bill for an act to provide for the rotation of power between the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. The bill is generating controversy as some senators argue that it will bring about unity and a sense of belonging for all, especially ethnic minorities, while others say to go against the Constitution of Nigeria. Well, in case you missed any of our news bulletin, for more updates, log on to our website on www.tv360nigeria.com. You can also follow us on our social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Google Plus at TV360 Nigeria. On Facebook, we are TV360 Online. Japan's population level immunity to COVID-19 has reached about 90% in major population areas after a recent Omicron wave. According to a recent study, people in Tokyo, Osaka and southern Okinawa got most of their immunity through contagion amid high case counts in those areas, particularly during the 7th wave of infections that peaked last month. Japan last week began distributing booster shots formulated to target the Omicron strain of the virus. I will take another breather and return with more stories and business. To stay with us. Welcome back. Simi Saladi goes on standby to bring us up to speed in the latest in the world of business. Over to you, Simi Sala.
Thank you, Falashade. Welcome to business. The monetary policy rate, MPR, which measures interest rate, has been jacked up from 14 to 15.5% to tame rising inflation. Godwin Emefiele, governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, made this known on Tuesday when given updates on the outcome of the Monetary Policy Committee meeting in Abuja. While the Apex Bank also raised the cash reserve ratio to 32.5% from 27.5%, the asymmetric corridor as well as liquidity ratio remains unchanged. In July, the interest rate was raised from 13% to 14%.
The committee thus agreed unanimously to raise the policy rate, to narrow the negative real interest rate and narrow interest rate gap, and rein in inflation. Committee thus voted unanimously to raise the MPR. 10 members voted to raise the MPR by 150 basis points, 1 by 100 basis points, and 1 by 50 basis points. 10 members voted to increase CRR by 500 basis points, while 2 members voted to increase it by 750 basis points. In summary, the MPC voted to 1. Raise the MPR to 15.5%, retain the asymmetric corridor at plus 100 and minus 700 basis points around the MPR, increase the cash reserve requirement ratio CRR to a minimum of 32.5%, and 4, retain the liquidity ratio at 30%.
Meanwhile, experts say the hike in interest rates will impact negatively on the economy. Speaking earlier in an interview with TV360 Nigeria, the CEO, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, Dr. Muda Yusuf, says reviews it will also prove a major challenge to investors indebted to banks. He said the increase will not do much to curb rising inflation in the country.
Well, the increase in monetary policy rate is likely to impact on interest rates. It's going to increase interest rates because what often happens is that once you have this kind of review, the banks will now review all the lending or loan terms that they have with them. In other words, all the people who are indebted to them will now have to, bear with an increase in interest rates, possibly to the extent of the review of the MPR. So that is an issue. It's a major challenge for investors that are indebted to the banks. In the last 4 months or so, we have seen 2 reviews. We have seen the first one in May of 150 basis points. So another one, I think, in July of 100 basis points. Now we are having another 150 basis points. So it's going to be a lot of pain on investors. It's going to hurt the economy.
We'll go on a short break here and return with stock market report. Nigeria's equities markets on Tuesday failed to sustain the previous day gains as the market decreased by 0.12% at the close of trading. The increase in monetary policy rate by the CBN and resultant rise in market rate continues to dampen sentiment. Now, the all-share index also depreciated from preceding day's highs to 49,161 basis points. The market's top decliners, May and Baker Nigeria and Regalins Alliance Assurance, lose a total of 3.74 naira. The biggest gainers on Tuesday are the Nigerian Exchange Group and Multiverse Mining and Exploration. Both equities share a gain of 23.21 naira. For our market summary, a total of 206 million volume of shares valued at over 2 billion naira exchanged hands in 3,777 deals. On the global scene, the story is much more or less similar. Worrisome economic news and rising interest rates are still driving down shares. So the UK's FTSE and US Dow Jones are in the low at 0.52% and 0.41%. However, the Nikkei stock ends in the bulls at 0.53%, thanks to trade in consumer and healthcare. Now that's all on Stock Market Report. Falashade has the rest of the news.
Well, many thanks, Simisala. On the foreign scene, Russian President Vladimir Putin may announce the annexation of multiple territories that were taken in Ukraine on Friday, according to the United Kingdom's military intelligence. The UK Defense Ministry tweeted on Tuesday that Putin is scheduled to address both houses of the Russian parliament on Friday. The ministry said Russian leaders hope that the announcement of the region's accession would vindicate the special military operation that Russia has claimed to be conducting in Ukraine and will consolidate support for the war in the country. Russia's seen strong pushback in recent days after Putin announced his intention to call up to 300,000 reservists for the military to replace its depleting forces. In sports, former captain of the Super Eagles of Nigeria and Chelsea legend John Mikel Obi has announced his retirement from professional football. Obi, who enjoyed a hugely successful career both at the club and international levels, recorded success during his 11-year stint at West London as he amassed a total of 6 goals and 13 assists in 372 appearances. The 35-year-old won 2 Premier League titles, 3 FA Cup trophies, the 2007 League Cup and the 2013 Europa League. He was also part of the Chelsea team that's won the Champions League trophy for the first time in 2012. And that's the size of our news bulletin. Many thanks for watching. I am Fola Shadi. Have a great day. Bye for now.